Hello everyone, it's Courtney from Coloring by Courtney, and today in this video I'm going to be doing a bit of a comparison of some cheaper, inexpensive, budget-friendly pencils with more artist grade, higher quality pencils. And we have a few options here, so I'm going to show you what we'll be working with. I have the Faber-Castell Eco Grip pencils. They're 24 colors. The red line of Faber-Castell is aimed towards children. It may be student grade, but red's usually towards kids. And next we have the Staedtler Norris Club color pencils, and they're an inexpensive brand as well. Here we have our Prisma Premiers, quite popular among the coloring groups. Marco Refine, or Marco Refine, however you say that. And these are an oil-based pencil, budget quality, fairly reasonable. 72 colors. They usually go for around $22 on eBay or Amazon. Sometimes they'll have a good price for them there, but eBay is usually your best bet. And this is a great price for that many pencils. Next we have our Staedtler Ergosoft, and these are quite popular as well. Johanna herself uses them for her coloring, so we'll be using these as well. Next we have our Polycolor pencils by Lyra. These are kind of cheap, but they still run you about $67 to $80 for the 72 piece, which is the full set. So they're definitely an artist quality pencil. And the bad boy, we got Faber-Castell Polychromos. These are, in my opinion, the highest quality of all pencils. They're very close. They come very close with Caran d'Ache's line of oil pencils, but these take the cake for sure. Alright, so those are the pencils we'll be working with. If you hear my 1-year-old in the background, please try to ignore it. We just put her to bed and she's giving us some trouble, so 1-year-olds shall be 1-year-olds. I have split up a mandala for you to see more clearly and accurately, especially right next to each other, just how different each pencil acts on its own and how they blend, how highly pigmented they are. And I did a mini test on my own, just side by side little color swatches, and you're going to be very surprised just how different each pencil goes down on the paper. And this paper is fairly decent quality, so it's going to be a very true test to, you know, the good quality books that people have nowadays. And it's just going to be a really interesting comparison. And this is also a piggyback video off of a blog post that I'm working on, if expensive tools make a difference. And I guess we're going to find out if that is true. So let's start with our Crayolas. Good old-fashioned, you know, the 50 set of Crayolas. I chose 9 colors, you know, the standard colors that are usually in a set. And you'll see that I have a random over here. I couldn't find my light green in my Crayola, so I took one of my Creta colors by Carmina. And these are very comparable to Crayolas. So I just took one of those because it's literally like using a Crayola pencil. So it's as close as you can get. So let's start with these. And I'm just going to start kind of heavy. I'm not having to push very heavy on the paper. And I'm going to lighten up as I get towards the middle. I'll do the other side. Now you do have to be careful with how much pressure you put with these pencils. They will break on you. Ooh, see, yeah. And then I'm gonna start kind of hard at the top and then blend into the yellow. It actually blended quite nicely. Ooh, we don't have a happy baby. I'm going to go back with my yellow just to kind of mix it a little bit better. I'm actually very surprised. That blended very well. I'm just going to do the same thing with this. I'm just going to start out darker and lighten up as I get towards the middle. And again with the darker blue. Like I said, I'm not having to push very hard to get some good coverage and some good pigment down, but you do have to work a little bit to get the colors to blend. And for some reason, when it comes to just any color pencil in general, I've found that the cooler colors you work with, like blues, purples, and greens, the leads are a lot harder than the warmer colors, like your reds, oranges, and yellows. So the red, or the orange and the yellow was a lot easier to blend than the blues. I'm just going to start off really dark here and kind of work my way out. And I'm going to blend it into orange. I'm just going to layer right on top of the red. I'm going to lighten up and then blend into the yellow. Again, I'm really shocked with how these are doing. And these are just Crayola pencils, you know, budget pencils. The regular, you know, children's box. You can get the set of 50, I think, for like $8. $6 maybe if you find a good deal. And there are, they did make a box of their pencils that are more, they gear them towards adult coloring, and they're significantly more expensive. Don't waste your money on those because they're literally the exact same color pencils, just a more fancier box. And I've seen people become so disappointed when they get them and they're not any different. The pigment's all the same, the pencil's literally the exact same, it's just a different box. So you're not getting any more of a higher quality pencil. But I'd say that these are pretty good. Again, I had to work the greens a little more to blend. But not too bad. I'm going to start with my dark up here. Again, not having to press too hard. I'm just going to lighten up as I get towards the middle. Ooh, and yeah, okay, so see, this is a huge problem with Crayolas. Let me sharpen that real quick. There we go. I'm not going to be able to get that great of a point, but I have some color on the tip. It's going to be a little rough, but we'll work with it. So I'd say they blended okay. They're not the best. You definitely have to, you know, work the colors in to blend, but I'd say they're not, that wasn't too bad to start. So those were the Crayolas. Ooh. Next, we'll move to the marker refines, or refine. And again, as best as I could with these, I picked around the same color so I could try to have the same kind of comparison. And already I can feel a difference. These are a lot easier to lay down. Definitely a lot brighter. And they blend very well. For their price, you probably wouldn't expect them to be so pigmented and blend very easy, but these are pretty good. Definitely a lot easier to blend than the Crayolas. Okay, I have no clue what happened to my video. It cut out in the middle of me coloring this part, and I literally talked to myself the entire time doing this entire coloring segment. So I didn't want to go and do it over again. I liked the way this turned out, and this was one of the only mandalas that I could, segment into a good equal 8 parts. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of talk about what I did. Unfortunately, I'm really upset because I talked as I was coloring and kind of, showing you how each one blended and, my thoughts as I was coloring. And so now I'm going to have to try to like go back and remember and kind of tell you. So, okay, so we did the Crayola in the video that your first part that you saw, and then I kind of stopped. It stopped recording for whatever reason in the middle of this segment. Then we went to the Faber-Castell Eco Grip pencils. They were a very hard lead, definitely a lot harder than, the Crayola and the Marcos. They blended okay, not the greatest. They felt kind of cheap in your hand. These are directed and marketed towards kids, so, definitely aimed for kids and should probably stick like that. I probably wouldn't use these again. Then I went over to save the polys for last. I went to the Lyra Poly Colors, and these are, just one of my favorite right next to the Polychromos pencils. These are oil-based, and they blended really well, and they're a little bit harder. They're a little bit softer than all these, but they're still a hard lead, and they blend really nice, and they're a good pigment too. Then I went to the Norris pencils by Statler, and these just were so unimpressive to me. The pigment is really light. I was saying while I was coloring, my wrist was literally hurting me from coloring this little part, just because you had to push so hard and put so much pressure down to get that saturation, and that's not even anything compared to, what you got with these ones. And these are cheaper than these go for. These are almost $20, and I was so unimpressed. These are not that great of a pencil. I did not like those. Then I went to the Prisma Premier pencils, very popular in the coloring community. Very bright. The blendability is great. What I had said was the only shortcomings with these pencils is the quality, because of their breakage. I had explained that core isn't bonded to the wood. So in a Prismacolor, if you were to drop it or, push too hard, you can literally shatter the inside. And because it's not, glued and bonded to the wood casing, if you were to like shake it around, you could hear the individual segments. I've done that before, and it's ridiculous. And every time you will go to sharpen, it'll just slowly pull out each time, and it's just really frustrating. So that's the only shortcoming with these. The other shortcoming is the fact that because they're such a soft core, the point doesn't retain very long, and so you're constantly sharpening. So that's just, you'll use up a lot of pencil with a lot of coloring with those, so you'll be putting more money out for these pencils. Then I went to the Statler Ergosoft pencils. These are the pencils that Johanna, advocates. She uses them all the time in her videos. They blend very well. They don't have as rich as a pigment, but they're definitely a lot higher pigmented than, a lot of the other pencils we used. And they're a decent price. They're probably in their 20s, 20 some dollars. There are only 24 colors. Maybe they'll make more colors in the near future. Let's hope. But, for now, they're an okay pencil. I like them. They're also really good for getting into, really tiny spaces and details, and they retain a point for a lot longer, and they can get to a really nice point in the first place. These, sometimes you can't really get to that great of a point, but these you can, and you can get in the really tiny details of, Johanna's books and any other really detailed book. And then I saved the granddaddy of all pencils, in my opinion, the Faber-Castell Polychromos, and these just go down on paper so well. They layer really nice, they have really good blendability, they have really good pigment, and I love them so much. They have a nice color range, 120 pencils, and while it's not 150 compared to the Prisma, really the Prisma 150 compared to their 132 is just all those grays, and really I don't need all those. So the 120 for me is a really great range of color, and they're harder than the Prismas, but they still blend because they're oil, so they blend really nicely, and they are wood bonded, so you could throw them on a wall and they probably wouldn't shatter like a Prisma would. A Prisma you could drop from here and they would break. It's a little insane. But these, they are expensive, but you're getting the quality that you're paying for. So, even if you can get like, one or two at a time, slowly build a set, I highly recommend these pencils. And so that's really all this video was about. Does higher quality pencils make a difference? And, I had to play devil's advocate here, but the answer is yes and no. Yes, because higher quality pencils is just a fact that, they're higher quality. So they have deeper pigment, they're easier to blend, and that's just how it is. With cheaper pencils, you're not going to have that, high of a pigment. It's going to be harder to lay down a color. It's going to be harder to blend them. So, in that aspect, yes, that does make a difference in some of your results. However, cheaper pencils, it doesn't matter if they're $8 or $200, you can get a look like this with, cheap pencils. You can get that nice blended look. You can get that rich pigment Does it take a lot longer? Yes, it takes a lot more effort. But, if you can't afford these, then it gives people hope that you can get this kind of look with cheaper pencils. It's really easy to do. It just, again, it needs more effort. And which that's not always a bad thing. So what I did was I rated my experience here. 1 being my least favorite and the hardest to blend, and 8 being my absolute favorite and the easiest to blend. So right here, bam, Norse Pencils by Statler got number 1, least favorite, hardest to blend. 2 was the Faber-Castell Eco Pencils. They're okay. I would give them probably to my kids to use. I probably wouldn't use these again. 3 will be the Crayolas. They're a cheaper pencil, but they have a good pigment. They're a little hard to blend, but you can get a decent blend with these. And then 4 would have to be my Staedtler Ergosoft. They were a decent pencil. I liked these. I would probably use them again. 5th on the list would be my Marco Refines. 6th would be the Prisma Premiers. They're not too bad of a pencil. I'm starting to use them a little bit more. Just the breakage issues is what gets me. And then Lyras are definitely my second favorite, but of course Faber-Castell Polys, easiest to blend on the chart. Just my favorite pencil out of all of these. So there's my little overview of budget pencils, comparing them to a few of my artist brands that I have. Now, these aren't the only, budget pencils out here. I'll mark a little B with which ones are budget friendly. Budget friendly. Budget friendly. These are budget friendly. I'm crossing these out because those are just awful. Don't even waste your money on them. And these are budget friendly. So these obviously aren't, all the cheap pencils out there. You have crazy art pencils. I didn't showcase my Create-A-Color ones that are on here. They're still really not even that cheap. I think they're like in the 30s, so I wouldn't even consider them budget friendly. In my opinion, budget friendly is like in the 20s and lower. But these aren't, I'm sure there are cheaper pencils out there. I know that there's ones that come in art sets, and so these aren't the only pencils out there. I'm sure people get way different results than I do. This is just solely my opinion. I'm sure there might be a cheapest pencil than Crayola, and they might be better than Crayola. I won't know. These are just what I have and what I compared. Also, one more thing before I end this video. If I were to have done this blindly and not have showed you and labeled each one that I used, I have a feeling that you would probably have a lot harder time picking out which one was which. What brand, what color segment belonged to what brand. Because labeling really shapens our judgment and makes us biased. So I'm telling you that this is Marco. Well, if I weren't to have written this, you might have thought this was Crayola or even Polychromos pencils. So that's the thing. If people were to not write what they used, it's open for interpretation. If someone, used Polychromos pencils, not to be, the judgmental one right now, but I've seen some pictures where people have colored with their Polychromos and it looks like you used Crayola. And then there are some times where people use Crayola and it looked like they used Polychromos pencils. So, it goes both ways. So really, it's really all about the labeling and, saying and showcasing what you actually used. Because again, if I didn't title these, you probably would have no idea what I even used. And it would be a lot harder to pick out 8 different brands from each other. So, you have to kind of take that into consideration. I really hope you enjoyed this video and it gave a little bit of insight into budget pencils and what they can really do. So I hope you enjoyed watching. Until next time, happy coloring.